Right. Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming along today. So my name's Mick Mccluney. I'm the technical lead for Trend Micro in ANZ. And today I was just going to talk about the challenge of reasonable steps. And the reason I say reasonable steps is that in the mandatory breach notification laws, if you start diving into that, part of that is, I've been breached and I've got to tell everybody, and you have a process and a procedure, and they kind of tell you about that. But they'll also look into whether you took reasonable steps to protect your data. So I'm going to talk about this in the context of what I see happening in the IT industry today in terms of threats, and then we'll go into how we can help you take those reasonable steps and what those reasonable steps are. So this is what we see. The threat landscape's evolving. I don't know if you know, but it's certainly apparent to me that the people making money from ransomware and business email compromises are making billions of dollars a year. It's becoming a business to them. And particularly the ransomware stuff is ransomware as a service. They run full sort of back office functions with help desks. If you need to buy the Bitcoin to get the key to unencrypt your data, they've got a full service operation. They want to make sure it works. So, to that extent, we're seeing really advanced capabilities here. And I'd say with ransomware, in terms of ransomware families, we see per month it's topped out at about 40 now. It's not growing, but that's 40 new families a month. It really is an aggressive business. Mind you, a bit of that's now gone on to sort of compromising endpoint machines and just getting them to do Bitcoin mining, because that's an easier way of getting paid. Anyway, the malware threat is certainly a key one. Here are some stats. I think that's a really key one. 254 days before you know you've been breached, we're finding. 87% of SMBs believe their business is safe because they just got one layer of defense. And I'm going to talk today about having multiple layers of defense, because we don't believe that just one thing's going to protect you, certainly. Number one concern, ransomware and phishing. So it's a challenging environment, and just how prepared are people today in the IT security landscape? Well, this is work done by IDC to sort of categorize, if you like, the preparedness of companies today. They reckon 2.4% are optimized. 10% are kind of just naive novice, ad hoc. 50% are reactive responders. We're just going to respond to things as they happen. We're not going to manage that process. So there's still probably quite a lot of work to be done. I love to show this one. This is business email compromise. The three most targeted areas in the world: Australia, 27.4%. We saw a similar thing with ransomware, actually, in that people were targeting Australia specifically for ransomware on a global basis. So are we under attack? Yes, most definitely we are. So to come back to reasonable steps, and you'll see the B.108 comes from actually the Privacy Data Act, and it's complying with APP11 in the compliance systems. And it goes through all of these things as things you ought to take into account when we're defining, did you take reasonable steps to protect your privacy and personal data? So a lot of these are about culture, training process, that kind of thing. I dived into the ICT security stuff because that's, I think, where we can help most. But you have to look at all of this in context. And really, this is driven from the 1988 Privacy Act, defining what privacy information was and what the reasonable steps were to take to defend it. I think the reason it's come back into focus now is the mandatory breach laws, saying if you've been breached, you have to going to be open about that. And then people are going to look at this and go, well, were you prepared? Did you take reasonable steps? So let's just go into some of those things. So if you dive into App 11 and you go, right, okay, tell me about what reasonable steps are, they mention all of these things. So back to Jack's point, encryption, really important, right? If the laptop's got the company database on it, at least if it's encrypted with BitLocker, you've got some sense of safety around it. It's not a great idea to have that. The USB stick with a customer list with emails and numbers, yeah, that could happen in any small or big organization. That's a significant risk. So how do we get the rule in there to say that if your employees copy something to a USB stick, it's encrypted? Well, we can help with that. There are solutions that do that. Or indeed, if you're emailing information around, right? Emailing personal private data around, I think this is a big gap. How do you get that to the other end and make sure it's encrypted in transit? So there are solutions that we have for that too, email gateways that automatically can encrypt data for you on delivery. So these are some of the things I'd like you to consider. If you want to look more deeply into these, the OIAC website here, .gov.au, tells you what personal information is, and then it gives you Act guidelines about Chapter 11 of the APP stuff. And I think, you'll get a good idea here. They really are trying to help you out here to tell you what you need to be looking at and what needs to happen. I like to show this slide because this shows the complexity of the challenge. We're rapidly evolving in the terms of the way our data and services and the things that we're doing are working. And this just represents a second challenge, right? You used to be on-prem and you had a perimeter and you dealt with it that way. Now we're going to cloud. There's no perimeter anymore. To the point of you take the bit of tin out of your shed or your back cupboard and you put it in somebody else's big shed with some security. Everybody knows the front door to that shed and they scan it every second of the day. The hackers are scanning Amazon and Azure for open ports all the time. They know where it all is, right? And actually they look at DNS changes. This is what I heard from an Amazon guy. They look at DNS changes on Amazon to find out when new VPCs come up and scan them immediately for open ports or open holes. So I think whilst the public cloud solves a lot of problems in terms of, access and ease of data, it also creates some issues because everybody knows where the front door is and it's being looked at all the time. So not only is IT evolving, but this stuff isn't going away. Back to my previous point, the ransomware, malware writers, the bad actors are making a lot of money and they're hacking you. They're developing or finding vulnerabilities all the time to attack you with. So Equifax was a struts vulnerability, right? They said, we just couldn't patch our struts thing in time. 3 months or whatever it was. But it was just straight into the database. It was there at the front end of the web servers. They just got attacked, all the data out, massive company failure, lots of CX, director level people have to go. WannaCry was another one. WannaCry was a very successful worming ransomware attack. Didn't make any money, but it was a very successful global attack. It was badly programmed actually to make a lot of money, but it was certainly a very successful worm. So, I think this just gets very difficult. The Zero Day Initiative is a trend initiative. We bought that with Tipping Point, and we do some great work there around finding vulnerabilities. So in 2 weeks' time, we've got the Pwn to Own competition. It's a global competition where hackers are invited in and we find vulnerabilities. We have the software vendors there. We have Google, we have Microsoft, we have VMware, and we find vulnerabilities in their systems, and we invite the hacking teams in, and we're going to pay out $2 million to find out new vulnerabilities in core bits of software. So we're really doing our bit for vulnerability research there. And once we find the vulnerability, we can give you the IPS rule to protect you. Some more data from Verizon. I can share these slides afterwards. So I want you to talk about layers of defense. So to go back to that SMB stat, most people said, look, I'm safe. I've got some of that. Gartner says, and we agree with them, that no one approach, no single defense layer is going to really work very well for you. And you have to have multiple defense layers. So application control, where you can possibly do it. It's a great defense against ransomware not being able to run. Machine learning I relate it to anti-malware, and, to go back to Jack's point about AV not being appropriate anymore, because any AV solution worth its salt. Not only deals with signatures and variant signatures, but it also has a machine learning component so that if we can't identify it specifically as malware with a file signature, we can look at the structure and the patterns in it and go, you look very much like CryptoLocker. Even though you're slightly different, we can identify you. Sandbox analysis, I'd say today, if your email isn't being sandbox analyzed, you're not taking reasonable steps. If you don't have a sandboxing solution on your email coming into your environment, I just reckon it's necessary these days. So that's anything suspicious goes into a sandbox, it gets detonated, you understand whether it's malware or not, and you can stop it going through. Really good defense, and I recommend, you get one, not necessarily, there are plenty out there. I think the trend point about this is there's some great defense things you can do here. You can buy point solutions, but you need as many layers as you can get, and you need it really from a consistent viewpoint. So that it helps if you can fit all these layers into a single defensive play for your customers. And Trend can certainly help you do that. Okay, so the corollary or the end point of all of this is that the layers work this way. First of all, you sort out the good from the bad by what you know. Do we know the signature? Was it an attack against an IPS rule we knew? Was it application control? We can just stop it. Then there's some stuff that's grey, and there's more grey stuff now than there ever was before. This was the kind of failure of file signatures to get everything. So let's apply some machine learning, some advanced analytics that have learned from all the thousands of samples of malware that we have to identify what malware looks like, and can we apply some AI in that area? If we still don't know that it's bad, well, we're going to let it run. But let's have some behavioral analysis to say, what are you doing to the system? Are you taking one file, encrypting it rapidly, taking another file, encrypting it rapidly? If you are, and I've not seen you before, you're not in my list of good software that I know's a standard encryption, you're not a PKZip or something, then I'm not trusting you, and I'm going to stop that process. So have that behavioral analysis in there. And then finally, you can stick stuff through to a sandbox, and Trend have a custom sandbox solution. So that's your SOE in a sandbox. That can be an important point. The malware writers do look for whether they're in a sandbox, and they also might look for things particular to your environment. If they're attacking your company in particular, or an Australian PC, and we've seen this, they might look for a Windows license code, or whether it's in the right regional area before the malware fires. So the cloud sandboxing might not get that, whereas a custom sandbox will. So I think this is just a run through of kind of the things I've said before, but these are the things you need to do. You need some visibility control, you need to respond, detect, and protect, and really in terms of you need to do this on your cloud environments, on-prem, and in your user environments. So to do the Trend Micro bit, we can help you do this with some smart, optimized, and connected real-time threat intelligence and some low operational impact solutions. Here are some reasons why we're good at what we do, and you can look up all these references. I can send these slides out actually afterwards, so you can get this for yourself. But there's lots of people who you can refer to who can give you some surety around what we do. So protecting personal data, what can you do? Look at some DLP, do some endpoint encryption. Yeah, some basic things, reasonable steps. Protect employee devices. So let's block the malware before it gets through. Let's have a sandboxing solution on email as it comes in. Let's look at the web traffic going out. See if it's going to bad sites. Is it going to sites that are command and control servers or known bad sites? Or is it, somebody clicking on the link in the email that's going to a phishing site? Endpoint protection with some behavior monitoring, some malware analysis, some machine learning, the classic defenses. If the malware gets onto the endpoint, let's try and stop it running. Endpoint application control is an ASD #1 recommended thing to do. Is it a reasonable step? And application control's hard, but it's a very good defensive step. And finally, network security. Can you see the attacks happening over the network? What are you doing to detect the breaches? I think in terms of your hybrid cloud and going to the cloud and having servers running in Amazon, Azure, you ought to look at host-based IPS and host-based capabilities to defend yourself there. On the network side, do you have an IPS that's sitting at the network to defend you from attacks and undisclosed vulnerabilities? And we can defend you from both of those. And then in the cloud, you can have workload security. But, you know, in Office 365, what are you doing for your customers in Office 365 to give them these levels of defense? Do you have a sandboxing solution that's looking at the files in Office 365 and Box and Dropbox and those kind of places where malware can spread? What's defending you there? Similarly, we have hosted email security, which will look at your email going in and out of Office 365. So you can have a sandboxing solution there. So you can take these reasonable steps with some relatively easy technology to implement. And finally, you know, if you want to go to the nth level here, you can have breach detection systems that sit on the network and look for network anomalies. We've got some deep discovery devices that'll look at the network traffic and they'll tell you about anomalies in that network traffic and sandbox stuff out and provide a real live intelligence point and defense points there. And it can detect whether somebody's trying a compromised host, and then after a compromised host, if they're trying to pivot within your environment and attack other servers, and then it can also detect data exfiltration. So all the stages of an attack, we've got breach detection systems to detect and prevent those, or allow you to respond to them.